They didn't have to be abused to feel unwanted. They just had to be left out. It begins in ways so subtle, no one would ever call it cruelty. A look, a laugh that doesn't include you, a sibling who gets the praise, the extra portion at the table, the unspoken warmth. You, on the other hand, are not unloved exactly, but somehow you are not chosen either. And that difference, it becomes your shadow. You notice it earlier than anyone thinks you do. Children, after all, are the sharpest observers. You learn that love is not something you can assume, it is something you must earn. And even then, it might not be given. You watch as one child in the family becomes the golden one, the achiever, the entertainer, the pride. Another maybe becomes the fragile one, the one who needs protecting. And you slip between the cracks, neither shining brightly enough to be celebrated, nor broken enough to be saved. You exist in the in-between. At first you tell yourself it doesn't matter. You convince yourself you like being unnoticed, that invisibility is freedom. But children don't want freedom. Children want belonging. And the ache of that absence, the silence of being overlooked, it burrows deep into your skin. So you start searching for ways to be seen. Maybe you overperform, bringing home good grades or bending into perfect behavior, hoping one day someone will look at you the way they look at your sibling. Or maybe you do the opposite, quiet rebellion, slipping further into the background because, at least in the shadows, no one can reject you outright. Both paths lead to the same truth. You are waiting, waiting to be chosen, waiting for someone to point and say, you, yes you matter most of all. But the days pass, the years stretch, and that moment doesn't come. And so you begin to tell yourself a different story. Maybe you were never meant to be chosen. Maybe you are not enough. Maybe invisibility is your destiny. And this lie becomes a kind of armor. It shields you from the sting of disappointment, but it also weighs you down. It shows up in the small, ordinary moments, at family gatherings where your words feel like they vanish midair, unheard, at school where you learn quickly that blending in means less pain, in friendships where you pour yourself out for others just to hold on to their attention. Every little act is an echo of that first wound, the child left standing on the outside of the circle. And when you go to bed at night, long after the noise of the world has quieted, that silence comes rushing back. The silence of not being enough to be noticed. The silence of wondering if anyone would choose you if they really had the option. People rarely talk about this wound because it is hard to explain. How do you say I wasn't hurt, I was just invisible? How do you grieve what you never really had? There are no bruises to show, no scars to prove, just the hollow ache of what might have been, the empty chair you always imagined someone saving for you. And so you grow up carrying it quietly. On the outside, you may look whole. You smile, you function, you even succeed. But underneath, the shadow follows, the shadow of the unchosen child. You grow older, but the shadow doesn't stay behind in childhood. It follows you quietly, like a second skin. The unchosen child becomes the adult who still wonders if they will ever be picked, if they will ever matter enough. At work, you notice it in the way you hesitate to put yourself forward. You wait for someone to say, "We need you on this project." You wait to be invited, rather than stepping in. Because deep down, you are still that child on the outside of the circle, waiting for someone to reach out their hand. In love, it becomes even louder. You find yourself clinging to people who give you crumbs, because crumbs are still more than silence. You mistake attention for devotion, and devotion for worth. Sometimes you overgive, pouring yourself out, cooking, listening, fixing, sacrificing, hoping that if you do enough, someone will finally look at you and say, "You are my chosen one." Other times you keep a wall up, pretending you don't care, convincing yourself you don't need anyone. But the wall is a lie. Behind it is the same child still waiting at the doorway. It shows up in friendships too. You're the one who checks in, who remembers birthdays, who keeps the thread alive. But when you look closely, you realize many of those threads are one-sided. You are terrified of letting go, terrified of being forgotten. Because invisibility once nearly broke you, and you refuse to taste it again. The strangest part is how invisible wounds repeat themselves. Without noticing, you are drawn to people who echo the dynamic you grew up in. The boss who overlooks your effort, the partner who gives just enough to keep you hanging on, the friend who takes and takes. Each one replays the same story, you waiting to be chosen. And each time you are not, it deepens the ache. No one else can see this cycle. On the outside, you may look capable, independent, strong. People even admire you. But they don't see the nights you lie awake replaying conversations, wondering if you said too much, wondering if silence means rejection, wondering what you must do to earn a place in someone's heart. They don't see the exhaustion of carrying around a question that never seems to have an answer. Am I enough to be chosen? And sometimes the ways you cope with it confuse even you. You might chase achievement, thinking if you become successful enough, no one can overlook you. But the applause fades quickly, and you are left with the same emptiness. Or you might withdraw entirely, convincing yourself solitude is safety. But then loneliness knocks at your door, reminding you that humans are not meant to be unseen. It is a paradox you live with every day. You crave closeness, but you fear abandonment. You long to be chosen, but you don't quite believe you are worth choosing. You put yourself in situations that replay the original wound, because familiarity feels safer than the unknown. Even if it hurts, at least it is a pain you recognize, and all the while the shadow whispers its old story. You are not enough, you are not wanted, you are not chosen. But here is the thing about shadows. They follow you, but they do not define you. They can cover you, but they cannot erase your shape. What you carry from childhood into adulthood is not a verdict. It is a wound. And wounds, though they leave scars, can also become places of unexpected strength. Still, before you reach that realization, there is often a breaking point. A moment when the weight of invisibility becomes unbearable. Maybe it happens when a relationship ends, not because of a lack of love, but because you realize you were never truly seen in it. Maybe it happens at work when you've bent over backward and still remain overlooked. Or maybe it happens in silence on some random night when you suddenly hear the echo of your younger self asking, "Why not me?" And for the first time you cannot answer. This breaking point is both terrifying and sacred. Terrifying because it feels like confirmation of your worst fear, that maybe you really are unchosen. But sacred because in that collapse lies the seed of truth. Waiting for someone else to choose you has always been the wrong question. Still, most of us fight it. We keep running the cycle, hoping next time will be different, hoping someone else will fill the hollow, hoping someone will finally notice. But adulthood has a way of showing us over and over. The love we begged for cannot be forced out of others. The recognition we craved cannot be earned by overperforming. The chosenness we wanted cannot be given by anyone else, not in the way we imagined. And that realization, though painful, is the beginning of something new. It is not the end of the shadow, not yet, but it is the first flicker of light cutting through. One day something shifts, not because the world suddenly notices you, not because the people who overlooked you come running back with apologies, not because the sibling rivalry dissolves or the comparisons stop. The shift comes from somewhere quieter, somewhere deeper. It comes when you finally understand. You cannot keep waiting at the door of someone else's house, begging to be let in. You have to build your own. At first, it feels impossible. The story of the unchosen child is old, etched into your bones. You've rehearsed it for years. Every disappointment seemed to confirm it. Every absence was proof. And yet, if you listen closely, beneath the ache there is another voice, faint, trembling, but steady. A voice that says, "What if chosenness begins within?" You start small. You notice the moments you dismiss yourself, the way you silence your opinions, the way you shrink your presence, the way you apologize for simply existing. And in those moments, you try something radical. You choose yourself. You speak, even if your voice shakes. You hold your ground, even if your knees tremble. You let yourself take up space, even if no one applauds. And something begins to change. The shadow is still there, yes, but light leaks in around the edges. You realize that being unchosen by others does not mean you are unworthy. It only means they could not see you. But you can see yourself. The healing is not sudden, nor is it perfect. There are days when you slip back, days when you find yourself waiting again, staring at doors that never open. But now you carry a new truth. Your worth does not depend on who steps through to embrace you. Your worth is not contingent on being the favorite, the golden child, the chosen one. Your worth is as steady as your heartbeat, as undeniable as your breath. Slowly, you begin to rewrite the story. You look at the friendships that drain you, and you ask, do I still need to beg for a seat at this table, or can I set my own? You look at love and you ask, am I giving myself away just to be kept, or am I standing whole, already complete? You look at work, at family, at life, and you start to see the difference between being overlooked and overlooking yourself. And the more you choose yourself, the less power the shadow has. It does not vanish. You still remember what it felt like to be invisible. But now the memory serves a different purpose. It becomes a compass, a reminder never to make yourself invisible again. In time, you discover that you were never truly unchosen. You were simply waiting in the wrong place, asking the wrong people to hand you what they didn't have the capacity to give. Chosenness was never about being the loudest or the best or the most useful. Chosenness was always about recognition, and that recognition begins in the mirror. The child you once were, the one who stood outside the circle, still lives within you. They are still waiting, still watching. But now you turn toward them. You reach for their hand. You kneel down and say, I see you. I choose you. I will not leave you behind again. And in that moment, something astonishing happens. The circle no longer matters. The approval, the favoritism, the comparisons, they lose their grip. Because you have given yourself what you always longed for. You have become the one who chooses you. From there, life begins to open in unexpected ways. When you no longer beg for visibility, you discover freedom in authenticity. When you no longer chase crumbs, you begin to taste fullness. When you no longer wait for someone else to declare your worth, you start living as if it was never in question. And the world responds. Not always in the ways you imagined. Not everyone will suddenly notice. Not everyone will celebrate. But some will. The right ones will. The ones who see you not because you twisted yourself into a shape they liked, but because you stood as you are, unapologetic and whole. This is the quiet revolution of the unchosen child, realizing you were never unworthy, only unseen. And once you see yourself, truly see yourself, you can never be unseen again. So, if you have carried the shadow, if you have lived in its weight, if you have whispered to yourself that maybe you are not enough, hear this now. You are enough. You were always enough. Chosenness is not a prize to be handed out by others. It is a birthright you reclaim the moment you stop waiting at the door and step into your own light. You are the answer you have been waiting for. You are the one who chooses you.